Discuss of our learning. Shab the Beis Hamikdash. The Refuah Shlema. Those that need. And also Yechel Master Ben Sarah. Let's start Yud Amid Beis. On the second line, Itmar. This is still Shabbos, I think. Second half, right? It says like this. Itmar, there was a statement of Amiroim. Noi sukkah ein mematim b'sukkah. We mentioned in the Mishnah that if you spread a sheet over the schach or under the schach to catch the falling leaves, that it would be possible. But we said Rav Chizda says that that's only to catch the falling leaves. But if you spread it there for decoration, then it's going to be fine. So what about the size of the sukkah? I mean, let's say I have a sukkah that's over 20 ams. Or I have a sukkah that's exactly 10 tvachim. And then I put these decorations in. Will it affect the size of my sukkah, either to make it kosher or to make it pasul? So it comes along this Gemara, Itmar, it doesn't affect the size of the sukkah. Rav Ashi says that that's only the height. But when it comes to the sides of the sukkah, the width of the sukkah, that's going to affect. Now, what's the pshat? Why only the height but not the width? Could be that the way that we view the width of the sukkah is the usage of the sukkah. Do I have the usage of the sukkah? So when I have, what we're talking about is I'm hanging curtains along the walls. Do I say that my real sukkah walls are what's behind those curtains? Or do I say that no, those curtains, the fact is I don't have the usage of the area that the curtains are in, so it becomes it's the minimal size of the sukkah. So when it comes to the height, I view it by its real height. When it comes to the sides, I view it by its usage. That's what it comes out. Minyamin Abdi de Rav Ashi. Here we have a servant of Rav Ashi, which we're not familiar with his name from other places. At least I'm not. So this servant of Rav Ashi, it sounds like Binyamin, but his name is Minyamin. It's Misha le Ketanta b'maya. His shirt got soaked in water. So he hung it up over the sukkah to dry. Amalei Rav Ashi says, Dalye, remove it. Dalye we had before, Dal means to remove. They're going to say that you're using schach that's not kosher. Why is it not kosher? Because a garment is mekabel tumah. Right? The garment is it's a beged. It's a garment. It's a keli. Not a keli like a receptacle, but it's considered a keli. So it's mekabel tumah, and you can't use it for schach. So Minyamin says, but what's the problem? Everyone's going to see that it's wet. No one's going to say that I'm using it for schach. They see that I'm hanging it up to dry. Rashi says, I meant that after it dries, you have to take it off.
This was again sideways?
No, this is over the top. Or over the schach, or under the schach. Yeah. No.
His theory was there for another purpose.
Right. Right. The way to, I mean, the complexity of this Gemara is all based on the Tosfos before. When I say that I spread a sheet over schach and my sukkah becomes pasul, is it automatically pasul, or is it because my sheet is also giving shade? Let's say I would have enough shade without the sheet. Tosfos was bringing out that your sukkah is kosher. It's only because of the shade that you're getting from it that would be a problem. Tosfos learned it that your schach was going to dry out if you didn't have the sheet up. So I put it over there so your schach doesn't dry out. If your schach dries out, then you're not going to have enough. So the sheet is actually helping your shade. That was the problem. According to Tosfos, if I had enough schach anyway, so what's the problem with hanging up a sheet to dry, a shirt to dry over the sukkah? It was fine. I had enough schach. So Rav Ashi was telling him very nicely. He says people are going to think. It's all people are going to think. It's not a real issue. No, it's meduyik in that. Yeah. And he says, no, people won't think because everyone sees it's dripping. They said, well, people will think when it's dry that that's what you're doing. I have one question left. That people will see that you have enough schach and the shirt doesn't really matter because it's kosher anyway. I don't know. Okay. In public. Itzmar, we have a statement now from Amirayim. Noi sukkah muflagim mimen arba. We're discussing noi sukkah decorations in the sukkah, which we said don't affect the validity of the sukkah. But let's say, why don't they affect the validity of the sukkah? We said that they're bottled to the schach. But let's say they're not really bottled to the schach. Why? Because I have schach. And instead of enmeshing the noi sukkah into the schach, I let them droop down 4 tvachim from the schach. So they're hanging down these decorations, like the kids make decorations and other decorations. Rav Nachman Amar Ksheira, Rav Chisda, Rabba Bar Ravuna Amar Psula. Rav Nachman says that it's fine, it's bottled to the schach. And Rav Chisda and Rabba Bar Ravuna say that it's pasul. Now, if you remember, we had a discussion before how tall a sukkah al gabi sukkah, when I have a double-decker sukkah, how tall is the upper sukkah? So Rav Huna said 1 tefa. Rav Chisda and Rabba Bar Ravuna said 4 tefachim, and Shmuel said 10 tefachim. So 4 tefachim to Rav Chisda and Rabba Bar Ravuna is considered an area that's significant. Comes along our Gemara, says, you know what? If you have schach that's drooping down 4 tvachim from the schach, that's already a significant area removed from the schach, and it's not bottled to the schach. So they said that to sit in such a sukkah, it's pasul, because it's blocking the schach. You have other things there that aren't bottled to the schach, it's not part of the schach. Turns out like this. Rav Chisda Rav Bar Ravuna Ikla Berish Galusa. Rav Chisda and Rabba Bar Ravuna happened to be at the house of the Reish Galusa for Sukkot. Agninu Rav Nachman b'Sukkah Shenoya Muflagim Min Arba Tvachim. Rav Nachman was connected to the house of the Reish Galusa, and apparently he had the rights. He would tell people where to sleep. So he put Rav Chisda and Rabba Bar Ravuna inside a sukkah that has schach that was not kosher according to them. The noi sukkah, the decorations were 4 tvachim away from which they held was pasul. So ishtiku v'layim v'lei midi. They were quiet and they didn't say anything to Rav Nachman. Amalahu, Rav Nachman says, Hadabar Rabban Mishmatayo. This is really tough. After what he does to them, he then says, oh, you changed your mind. Yeah, thank you, Salman Rad. He's telling me that in the comments, saying that Rav Nachman was a son-in-law. Yeah. Rabba Bar Ravuna was the father-in-law of Rav Nachman. And could possibly his daughter was Yalta, which was Rav Nachman's wife. So he was the son-in-law of the Reish Galusa. Yeah. Yeah. So he tells them, is Rav Chisda the one that paskin about the cheese, that they had to wait too long? Oh, that's so interesting. We'll have that. We'll have that come on. So, good morning. So he says, they're like, how we got you? You thought that it was because we were passing like you. It's not so. we're actually pater from sukkah anyway, because we're shluchei mitzvah. The rule is that Isaac the mitzvah is pater min mitzvah. If you're doing one mitzvah, you're exempt from other mitzvahs. Now, it's not so clear what's the exemption. Is it only because it's going to be difficult to do the second mitzvah as well, or is it automatically an exemption? That's a machlekes Tosfos in the Ran. Tosfos holds that it's only because, you can see the Tosfos on the bottom, shluchi mitzvah nan, Tosfos holds it's only because if you would try to find another sukkah, that would be affecting the way that you fulfill the first mitzvah. Now, what mitzvah were they doing? They were going to visit the Reish Galusa, who apparently was considered the Rab. And Chayav Adam lahakbel pnei Rabbi beregel, a person's obligated to visit his teacher on the holidays. In the biblical times, you're supposed to go to the Beis Hamikdash. And then there's also a rule, Chayav Adam lahakbel pnei Rabbi. Where do we learn it from? We learn it from the Shunamis, the Shunamite woman. She was, her son passed away, and she takes the animal, and she's heading to Elisha. And the husband says, "Why are you going? Le Shabbos hayom, le Chodesh hayom. It's not Shabbos, it's not Chodesh. Why are you going?" The Gemara says, "Oh, it sounds like if it would be Shabbos, it would be your Chodesh, you'd be chayav to go." So did we see it from this that you have to visit your teacher on the holidays? Yeah, the Mefarshim asked that Shabbos and Rosh Chodesh isn't a holiday anyway. So what's the raya? Subshat that the raya is the other way. The raya is that he didn't say it's the regel. He said it's Shabbos and Rosh Chodesh, because the women would go on Shabbos and Rosh Chodesh to visit the Rab. That's a proof that the men did not go. So when would the men go? Men would go on the regel. So Chayav Adam Shabbos and Lechidushim, because the women weren't there on the regel. That's a proof that the men were there. So anyway, that's a shot. Whatever the case is, Rav Chizda and Rabba bar Rav Huna are visiting the Reish Galusa on the holiday, and they're exempt from the mitzvah of sukkah, because if they would have to go find the sukkah, they wouldn't be able to concentrate on learning or visiting the Rav. Deep discussions here.
There was always hotel rooms and Airbnbs in Yerushalayim available.
Yeah, well, they never complained about it. I don't know if it was always available.
No,
right. I know, but it says, "Lo Amar Adam Tzarli Hamakim Shalom B'Yerushalayim." No one ever complained about his place. I don't know if that means that it was really good. It was a chiddush that they didn't complain. They complain even when it's good, right? Okay. There's a big discussion in the Achrayim over here. Apparently, Chayv on the Makal Pnei Regel is a derabanan. In Sukkah is a deraisa. So do we say Isaac b'mitzvah pater min mitzvah? When you're Isaac in the mitzvah of a derabanan, that it exempts you from a mitzvah deraisa? It's a huge discussion. Anyway, this would be a proof of that. Yeah, the Brisker Rav at the Talmud wrote a sefer Pomeranzik. Wrote a sefer Emek Bracha. He learns that basic that Chayv Adam Kabbalah Regel, the person has to see his teacher, is a rabbinic obligation, but it's a kiyum of a deraisa. I'm obligated. Only the rabbis obligate me to do it, but when I do it, I fulfill a deraisa of a regel or some sort of deraisa. So if that's the case, so then I'm still a Isaac b'mitzvah, even though my obligation was rabbinic. My fulfillment is a deraisa. Okay, Amar Rav Yehuda Amar Shmuel. Rav Yehuda says the name of Shmuel. Okay, we're about to enter into a discussion here that's going to take about a page. It's not complicated. it's about sleeping under a canopy inside a sukkah. Sort of like you would imagine this going under an umbrella in a sukkah. Do you fulfill the mitzvah? Does the umbrella take away the mitzvah? So what you want to imagine is, let's say you had an umbrella hat, right? Put on a hat with that sombrero. Would that say, well, you're not in the sukkah, you're under a sombrero? No, if you're sleeping. Okay, well, okay. But let's talk about any sort of sleeping also. Yeah. Right, the tent. Okay. So that's what the Gemara starts off like this. A person's allowed to sleep in a kila. A kila is a bed that has a canopy. Even though there's a roof, as long as the roof is not 10 tefachim raised above the bed. That's how Rashi puts it in. Like a mosquito netting, right? It's not raised 10 tefachim above the bed, so therefore it's not considered a real tent, that you're in a tent inside the sukkah, you're not in a sukkah, you're in a tent. No, this is like a blanket. It's not significant enough that makes you like, no, this is not a sukkah, you're in some other container. No, it's not a container, it's nothing. Okay. Gemara asks, Tashema, come and listen. It's like a straight attack. What are you talking about? You're not yet. Simple teretz. That kila that we said you're not yaitze, that canopy, that bed, that was because it was 10 tefachim tall. That's a different story. This was what we're talking about is under 10 tefachim. Meisvei, the Gemara has a question. If someone sleeps under a bed, he's not yaitze. How tall is the bed going to be? It's going to be under 10 tefachim. The Gemara says, that's talking about a bunk bed. No, it doesn't say bunk bed. That's talking about a bed that's tall, that's 10 tefachim tall. So that's already considered like a tent. You're in a tent under the sukkah. But a regular bed is going to be low to the ground. That you're going to be fine.
What about the guy sleeping on top?
Top is for sure, okay. Yeah.
Even if he's above 10.
Right. They joked about this guy that he said, he calls the Rav, he said, he's in a yeshiva dormitory, they have a bunk bed. He said he's not sure if he could sleep on the top bunk because it says his roommate underneath is sick. And it says, Shechina Shriya al-Gabe al-Lamayla Menachayla or something. Shechina is above the head of the sick person. He doesn't know if he's allowed to lay there because there's the Shechina. Okay. The Shechina is above the head of the sick person. So he was on the top bunk. So his friend underneath was sick. He wasn't sure if he's allowed to lay down because the Shechina is there. It's to sleep at his feet. Yeah, okay. So, we're talking about that the bed, which bed had the problem, that was 10 tefachim tall. Tashema, come and listen. Psula. If you spread a canopy over a canopy, kinaifis is like the word canopy. The kinaifis has 4 posts, and it's a bed that has this, it's a more permanent type of bed. It says it's puzzle. The Gemara says, well, Hasam Nami the Gaviya Sarah. That's talking about it's 10 tefachim tall. We have a simple answer to all the questions. Every time you ask a question, you say it's possible. You say, well, that was over 10 tefachim. The Gemara says, Valik Tani Hachi. You're not going to get away with it this time. The Tanya was taught in a brisa. Naklitin Shnayim v'Kneif Sarba. There's 2 types of canopy beds. One is where it comes to a point. Other one where it's flat. So when it comes to a point, we're talking about that there's 2 posts on either side of the bed. There's 1 post on each side of the bed, which makes it into a canopy with the rod in the middle. That's the naklitin. The kinaifis, on the other hand, is 4. So we have different names for beds here. We have the naklitin is 2 posts, and the kinaifis canopy is 4. Pirs al gabi kinaifis is psula. Al gabi naklitin is ksher. Kinoif is canopy. So, okay. Yeah, Dr. Stein came up with the background that he didn't put on over here, but it was a can of peas. So that's his canopy. Okay. So we make a difference. Kinaifis is pasul and naklitin is kosher. But however, it goes on. Ready? When is naklitin kosher? If it's not 10 tvachim high. What does that tell me? That kinaifis is pasul even when it's not 10 tvachim high, because we're doing a contrast here. Naklitin to kinaifis, two types of beds. We're comparing this bed to this bed. Saying that this bed is kosher. Yeah, this bed is kosher. The canopy, the two-posted one is kosher. The canopy, the four-posted one is pasul. When is the two-posted one kosher? When it's under 10 tvachim. What does that tell me? When's the four-posted one pasul? When it's under 10 tvachim. It has to be a contrast. You see, Michlal the Kinaivas av pishen gavayin asara. Rabbi Yehuda Shmuel says that it's kosher, everything is kosher under 10 tvachim. It turns out it's not so. Naklitin is kosher, but kinaifis is pasul under 10 tvachim. When it says shani kinaifis to be, you're right. Special halacha. Kinaifis, canopy, is pasul even under 10 tvachim. We were talking about akila. We were talking about naklitin. That under 10, or a bed actually. We're that underneath it is kosher if it's under 10 tvachim. But we have the kinaifis, which is permanent. Even though it's under 10 tvachim, it's still considered a tent. It's a great question. Shmuel says that when you have a double-decker sukkah, the upper sukkah makes the lower one pasul. How tall does the upper one need to be to make the lower one pasul? 10 tvachim. Why? Shmuel says, the way that it would become kosher, which is 10 tvachim tall, that would invalidate the one under it. Comes along Shmuel here, and he says that kinaifis, he says that usually a bed that's under 10 tvachim is kosher. That fits perfectly fine. However, we just established that kinaifis, which is a permanent bed, even under 10 tvachim is pasul. Says, why is it worse than an actual sukkah? When I have one sukkah under another sukkah, it's only pasul if the upper sukkah is 10 tvachim. Now you're telling me that the canopy, even under 10 tvachim, would make it pasul because it's so permanent. And the sukkah wasn't permanent. Why does the sukkah need to be 10 tvachim to make it considered a sukkah that it invalidates the one that's under? Mary answers like this: Amri hasam de lemipsal sukkah basara, achal de shavi oila batzmeser nami haveila. You're doing a different accomplishment. Over there, I wasn't saying that the person was not in a sukkah. Well, let's do it like this. When we're talking about the bed, I'm not saying that the person is not in a sukkah. I'm not saying that the sukkah is invalid. The sukkah is kosher. You're just saying that the person put himself in a situation where he's not in the sukkah, he's in something else that's in the sukkah. Over there, I'm invalidating the sukkah. I'm not saying that the person isn't yaitze. I'm saying the sukkah is possible. To make a sukkah invalid, I need to have a sukkah 10 tvachim that's above it. To make the person not yaitze, then even if it's under 10 tvachim, he's not yaitze. Depends, am I invalidating the sukkah, or am I saying that the person didn't fulfill his mitzvah? To make the sukkah invalid, you need a sukkah that's above it of 10 tvachim. To make the sukkah by the bed, the sukkah is perfectly valid. The person just climbed under the bed. Okay. Amar Rav Tachlifa, Amar Avimi, Amar Shmuel, Hayashim B'Kila Ara, Maitzirei Shechutz L'Kila V'Kari Kriya Shema. When a person recites Shema, he's supposed to be dressed. He's not allowed to recite the Shema when he's naked. Let's say a person is in bed and he's naked, but he's in this canopy bed. So he wants to recite the Shema. So what he does is he sticks his head out of the canopy, and he says the canopy will be like my blanket, my pajamas. It's fine. He's wearing a bed. Yeah, it's like a sleeping bag. Yeah. So Mesve, the Gemara is a question. It says it's fine. Mesve, you get how we're getting into this. Because do we view a bed as a person's blanket, or do we view it as a house, as a tent? Mesve, it's a good. Hayashim bekila aram la yatsi reishi chutz lekila v'yikr kriyashma. We have a question. Exact contradiction. It says if someone is sleeping naked in a bed, in a canopy bed, he should not put his head out. Talking about that bed was 10 tefachim high. It doesn't help to put your head out of a house, as we'll see in a minute. Let me go a little further. Also logical. The Brisa says, what is it similar to? If someone is naked inside his house, and he has to say Shema. He can't put his head out of his house and say, "What? I'm wearing my house. I'm dressed. Look, my house is my clothing." Doesn't work like that. So here also, if it's 10 tefachim tall, he can't say that I'm wearing the bed, that it's my, no. What happened, you see, the real logic behind this is it says, your camp needs to be pure. And therefore, when you recite Shema, you have to be dressed. So what is considered your camp? So when you're wearing clothing, even though the person's naked under his clothing, but his camp is covered from his nakedness. The room that he's in is covered. But if it's considered a room, his clothing, like his bed, is considered a room. So whatever you're going to tell me, the room outside of the room is holy, but the room but his room is not kodesh. If his room is a room. Okay. Shma mina. We see from this that the 10 tefachim is what's going to make a difference, if it's considered clothing or if it's considered a room. The Gemara says, a bias nami, when it comes to a house, even if it's not 10 tefachim tall, I'm not sure. We said a house needs to be 4 by 4 amas, but we didn't say that it needs to be 10 tefachim tall. We said a sukkah needs to be 10 tefachim. Even the kvi, since it's permanent, it's considered a tent. It's no worse than a canopy. Which the canopy, we said, is considered a tent even under 10 tefachim. A house also will be considered a house under 10 tefachim. And you can't put your head out of the window in a house saying that, 1 second, I'm wearing my house now. Because a house is permanent, it doesn't matter if it's above 10 tefachim or under 10 tefachim, it's always considered a house. It's not considered clothing. Okay, we're about to learn another brisa, another memra of Shmuel, but it's said exactly in the reverse of what we learned over here. We learned over here that if someone sleeps under a bed, he's yaitza, and Shmuel explains that it can't be 10 tefachim tall. Now we're going to do it the other way. There's another version of this where Rav Yehuda said in the name of Shmuel, you're allowed to sleep in a canopy even if it's 10 tefachim tall. Why? Because it doesn't have a roof. We're talking about the slanted roof. Since it doesn't have a flat roof, it's not considered a tent, even though it's 10 tefachim tall. The Gemara says, 1 second. We have a brisa that says that you're not yaitza, and we're thinking that it's before we said that it's 10 tefachim tall. Here we're saying it's also 10 tefachim. Shmuel says it's good even if it's 10 tefachim tall. The Gemara says, that's talking about a flat roof. Flat roof is a problem. So basically, 2 criteria to make it invalid: flat and 10 tefachim. Tashima, naklitin shnayim v'kinaifas arba. Naklitin with a 2-posted bed, and the kinaifas is the 4-posted bed. Pirs al gabi kinaifas is psula. He spreads it over the 4 posts, then it's puzzle. It's flat. Al gabi naklitin kshera, over a 2-post, it's kosher. Oblavachli naklitin gvayim menamita asara tefachim. As long as it's not 10 tefachim tall. Look at what's going on. Even though it doesn't have a roof, 10 tefachim tall invalidates it. Shmuel said, even if it's 10 tefachim, it's kosher if it doesn't have a roof. We said 2 criteria. The Gemara says, Shani naklit in the kvi. Maklitin is permanent. So therefore, even though it's two posts, but it's attached to the bed in a solid way, it's not just like you wrapped it up. This is two posts that are attached, and it's permanent. So 10 tefachim, even though it doesn't have a roof, is going to be considered a tent. The Gemara says, "Whoa, ikvi lehavi kekinaifas." Now you're getting into trouble. If you're making it permanent, then it should be like kinaifas, which is the four-posted, which you said was permanent, which even under 10 tefachim was puzzle. The Gemara answers, it's all relative. Legabi kinaifas like kvi. It's not as permanent as kinaifas. Legabi kila kvi. When it comes to kila, it's considered permanent. So it's semi-permanent. Permanent in relative to the kila, which means that if it's over 10 tefachim, it's going to be puzzle, even though it's slanted. Kila was only if it's flat. But if it's under 10 tefachim, it's not going to be the level of permanence of kinaifas because it's not that permanent.
It's a long-term rental compared to Airbnb.
Right. Like this line says, it's like a long-term rental compared to Airbnb. Yeah, remember the Yiddish comedian Jigen, the Yiddish comedian. He said he wanted to explain the theory of relativity. So he says it's like 2 hairs on my head. So he says 2 hairs in your soup. He says it's more than it's too much, more than you wanted. The 2 hairs on your head, Okay. Darash Rabba Baravuna. Rabba Baravuna taught. Mutalishin Bekila, Afapishi Yesh Lagag. Afapishi Gvaya Sara. Big Chiddush. Rabba Baravuna. We had him before. He was the one that was a friend of Rav Bizda when it came to the 4 Tvachim. He says that you're allowed to sleep in a kila even though it has a roof. Okay. Even though it's 10 Tvachim tall. Whoa, that's both problems. Gemara says, come on, who does he hold like? Says Rabbi Yehuda. He's got another opinion here. It's totally different opinion. Rabbi Yehuda hold, if you remember, Rabbi Yehuda held a sukkah over 20 amas is kosher. He holds that a sukkah is a diras keva. He says that you're not going to come and with a temporary tent and say that you're not in the sukkah. Someone lifts up an umbrella inside the house. He's not scared about raining on his wedding or whatever. So it's not like you're not in the house. He's in the house. The house is the house. The umbrella is nothing. So he says over here that the little tent that you have inside the sukkah is a permanent dwelling, according to Rabbi Yehuda. It's not. It was taught in the Mishnah. Rabbi Yehuda, it was our custom to sleep under a bed in the sukkah in front of the elders. And they didn't say anything, whatever. The Gemara says, Rabbi Yehuda. If Rabbi Baravuna is passing anything like Rabbi Yehuda, and why? Because he's saying that you can sleep in a tent and there's no problem. And we don't say that it takes away from the sukkah. Let him just say the halach like Rabbi Yehuda. That's a big chiddush. It says, Yamar halach Rabbi Yehuda have amina hanimili mita legaba asuya avokila del teicha asuya malay. If he would say the halach like Rabbi Yehuda only said sleeping under a bed. He said maybe sleeping under a bed is acceptable because the bed is made to go on top of it. When you're sleeping under it, it's just a random thing. It's not a real tent. However, when you sleep in a kila, that netting, that you're supposed to go in, maybe that's considered a real tent. It's not like you just crawled under a bed. You're actually in a container, in a tent that's separated from the sukkah. That's maybe you're not yaitza. Kamash malan. So it comes to tell me, time of the Rabbi Yehuda, don't misunderstand Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Yehuda wasn't saying that the yaitza because it's a bed and the bed is made to go on top, not under. The reason for Rabbi Yehuda is because sukkah is a ayal keva. And the bed is a ayal arai. And it doesn't matter if it's under a bed or if it's on top of the bed and under the kila, you're always going to be yaitza because it has to do with permanent and temporary. It doesn't have to do with under or over. Okay. Hidla ala sagefen. Moshe, you know what time you have to go. I'm going to try to get until the bottom of the next page, possibly to Yud Beis, to the Mishnah on Yud Beis. I don't know. I'll try to get to the bottom of Yud Aleph on Yud Beis. Okay. Hidla las agefen. Vesa de las. Vesa kisus. Someone puts a ivy or a grapevine, or a gourd. You know, the gourds grow. You put them on on a raised area and they hang down. I have a friend that's growing this squash. It basically grows on a sukkah, and they hang down underneath like lanterns. So v'sichich al gaba, but he puts schach on top of it as well. So it's psula, it's invalid, because schach is not allowed to be attached to the ground. And here he's growing his ivy. But if he has so much schach that's much more than all of that ivy, then it's kosher. Or let's say he cut it from its base, from its source. It's kshera. It's going to be kosher. This is the rule. Two halachas. Anything that's makabel tumah, anything that's a vessel, and it didn't grow from the ground, it's not kosher for schach. Schach has to be grown from the ground, and it can't be a vessel. So, for example, if it's flax or cotton, it grows from the ground, that would be fine as long as you didn't turn it into a garment. Or anything else that grows from the ground that's not considered a vessel. I mean, wood grows from the ground, but as long as it's not a soup bowl or a chair or a table or something, it grows from the ground.
The gourd itself.
The gourd itself could be a vessel, yeah. They have that mate, the thick bamboo, if it's a container, yeah. Yeah, if it's made into a stick that used for walking. It has to be a keli already, yeah. Yeah. Machshava, the thought that you have about it. Right. But if it's not made into that, your thought makes it into a keli. Yeah, with the exception of fruits that are not wet. They're makabel tumah, they're just not muksha makabel tumah. You know what I'm saying? You can't say, well, I never got those fruits wet. That's not how it works. The fruits are makabel tumah, you just takes one more step. But when it comes to something that's not a keli, until you decide that it's a keli, machshava makes it, your thought makes it into a keli. Okay.
Gourd, it's open and cut. But you thought it's not a keli.
And the problem is a fruit automatically is makabel tumah, because yeah, once it starts, once it was a keli once, then there's a problem with it afterwards. Yosef Rav Yosef Kameder Rav Huna. Rav Yosef is sitting in front of Rav Huna. The Yosef Akama. He's sitting and he says, Oisha cuts some kshera. If he cuts the ivy from the source, where it's growing, then it's going to be kosher. Okay, that's a quote from the Mishnah. He says, V'amar Rav says, that's not good enough. You got to go up there on your step ladder, and you have to shake all the schach, like to redo it, because when it was put up, it was invalid. You have to go up and put it down again. So you lift it up and put it down. Amalei Rav Huna. Rav Huna says to Rav Yosef, he says, Hashmuel Amra. Rav Huna was a major student of Rav. Rav Yosef is telling Rav Huna what Rav is saying. Rav Huna says, Shmuel said it. Arjuna Rav Yosef Lape. Rav Yosef turns around. He turns around in disgust, like upset. Amalei, he says to Rav Huna, did I say Shmuel never said that? Amra Rav, Amra Shmuel. I just said that Rav said it. Rav said it and Shmuel said it. I don't care if Shmuel said it. I was just saying that Rav said it. Amalei, Rav Huna responds to Rav Yosef, I'm telling, that's not what I'm saying. The Shmuel Amra, below Rav. I'm saying that Shmuel only said it. Rav did not say this at all. Rav does not say that you have to shake it. Why? The Rav would say just cutting it itself is good enough. Rav Huna is a major student of Rav, and he's going to tell us what Rav holds. Ki other Rav Amram Chasida, I'll prove it to you. Rav Amram Chasida, you mentioned this before. Rav Amram Chasida, Rama Techilta Leparzuma Dinchi Besa. He put chelas. He put tzitzis on his wife's clothing. Talan v'leipasak Rashi Chutim Shalem. He put it in but he forgot, when you make tzitzis, you put in the 4 strings, you fold it over, and then you have 8. He put in one big string, and it was folded over. Now you're supposed to cut in between to make it, because or else it's looped. You got to cut it so it's 4 strings. He put it in, he forgot to cut it. So he just tied it up, and it's really, what would it be, like just 2 with loops. It would be 2, right? 4 altogether, 4 loops. So, Asla Kami de Rav Chia Barashi comes to Rav Chia Barashi. Amalei Hachi Amarav. Rav says, Rav Chia Barashi is a student of Rav as well, major student of Rav. He says, Rav says, Mafsukan being you can cut it now, it's going to be fine. Alma, Psikasan to Yasiyasan. Achanami Kitsasan to Yasiyasan. You see, there's a problem. When you make a sukkah, you have to make it kosher. You can't build a sukkah and kosherize it later. This is called tasa v'leimanasi. It says chagasukas tasa. You have to make it kosher. You can't make it invalid and then do something to validate it. For example, you can't put the wall, Eli, when you make those sukkahs, the canvas sukkahs that have a problem if it blows in the wind, so they have the straps. So you can't put up the schach first and then put on the straps. You have to put on the straps first and then put up the schach. Why? Because if the canvas isn't kosher, then you put on the schach, and now you're making the sukkah kosher. You're kosherizing the sukkah. You're kosherizing the sukkah. You're not making a sukkah kosher. No, when I put up the schach, I've now made the sukkah kosher. I'm making the sukkah and I'm making it kosher. No, because over there I already have the schach. The schach is the sukkah, and all you're doing is you're making it kosher afterwards. That's a problem. You can't kosherize the sukkah later. He's saying that I can't, if it's made like ivy, it's growing over it. I can't just come and cut it. You have to make the sukkah. You have to make it lechatchila kosher, not kosherize it later with an act. Right. I know, but the sukkah is possible. How are you making it kosher? You're adding the straps. Yeah. So comes along Rav Huna. They're not walls, right? So I can't make. Right. So let me ask like this. Let's say I have tzitzis, and it pulls off. No, the flapping walls are either good or they're not good. But the problem is if they're not good, yeah, the walls are the straps. Right. Let's say I have a tzitzis. It got pulled out. Sometimes it gets yanked out. So what I do is I'll sew up my tzitzis. I'll sew it up by putting the thread through the little hole that's left there, and I'll make it kosher by sewing it back on. So that's the problem of tasav leimanasi. My tzitzis are becoming kosher, but I'm not making the tzitzis. The tzitzis were already made. I can't have a made sukkah becoming kosher later. However, Rav held that you're allowed to make it kosher later by cutting it. Why? Rav holds that cutting is considered making. Shmuel didn't hold that. Shmuel holds that's just an activity that kosherizes it. That's not actual making of the sukkah. So Rav says that cutting the ivy is making the sukkah. That's like putting on the schach. Rav also holds that cutting the tzitzis, the loops of the tzitzis, is considered making it. That's considered like tying the knots. So Rav would say that it's kosher. Now, why was he putting tzitzis on his wife's clothing? He happens to hold, or Rav Chasida happens to hold, that tzitzis is obligation at night as well. And therefore, he holds that it's not a mitzvah sasesha man grama. He holds women are obligated in tzitzis. And his wife had to wear tzitzis. Rav Amram Chasida. It's not the halacha. We don't pass him like that. Yeah. Yeah, someone told me I saw that this lady was cleaning for Pesach. She's cleaning all day. Anyway, I had this clothing that I needed to get from one of them. She just put it on. So anyway, she's walking around with tzitzis because she's wearing tzitzis. So what are you doing? She says, it's a big deal.
It's like a picture of the kid. There is a picture of a kid. Like, don't trust the kid lady. She's wearing the sits.
Yeah. It's in style. Now the Gemara asks, okay, so Rav has an interesting opinion. His opinion is that of course he holds Tasav Alemanasi is the problem, but he holds that cutting it is considered asiyah. And therefore you don't need to shake the schach, lift it up and put it back down. Shmuel, on the other hand, holds that you do have to shake it. The Gemara says, Shmuel holds that cutting it is not considered making it, or we don't say that cutting it is considered making it. Shmuel holds that you have to actually do something different. But Tani Shmuel, Misham Reb Chia. Shmuel taught in the name of Reb Chia. Reb Chia was the one that edited the Brises. He's a student of Rebbe. He says, he's the uncle of Rab. He says, Hital Shnei Kronos B'Vasachas. Yeah, I'm not sure exactly how he's doing this, but he has the two corners of the tzitzis. And instead of putting tzitzis in each corner, he decides to put in two corners together. He's going to tie it up in the knots somehow, and then he's going to cut it in the center, and then he'll have the two corners separate. Yeah. How he's going to do it, I don't know, like Houdini, somehow make these knots to get it in, because I don't know how to make two knots. But anyway, he figured it out. So, Shmuel says it's kosher. Yeah. Shmuel says it's kosher. That means, how could it be kosher? It wasn't cut. Well, Shmuel must hold that cutting it is considered the whole making it. So Shmuel holds the same thing as Rav. My love, shekosher v'achikach pasak. It must be that when did he make it? He tied the knots, and then he cuts it. And you see it's still kosher. Umar says, lie. No, you made an assumption there. That assumption was never in the original. You cut it and then you tie the knots. Yeah, it would be very difficult to make those knots anyway. So first you cut it and then you tie the knots. It says, of course there's no problem. You didn't make the knots yet. Of course it's fine. It says, no, I could have thought that there's a problem there. Binan kanaf b'shas psil v'leka. I could have thought it says, al kanaf psil tchelas, that you have to put the kanaf, you have to put the psil into the corner, but you can't put it into two corners. Maybe I could have thought that you can't put it into two corners. Now, basically what the Gemara is saying is, I could have thought that we're going to make up a new halacha that doesn't exist, and we're going to say that there's a problem with putting it into two corners before you cut it. Kamash Malan, that we don't make up that new halacha, and we say that there's no problem to put it in two corners as long as it's cut before you tie the knots. It's fine. Okay, that's what Shmuel said. Meisvei, where's the question? Let's say you put it in, but you didn't cut the ends of it. Psulin, it's puzzle. My love, psulin oilam. Sounds like it's always puzzle. Do you have to do Rav? Rav said that if you cut it afterwards, it's fine. Here we have a brisa that says that if you cut it afterwards, it's puzzle. It's a very strong question on Rav. The Gemara says, Amalach Rav. Rav says, my psulin, you know what it says that it's puzzle? Psulin achi yifsaku. It's puzzle until you cut it. It didn't say anything about cutting it. It says if you put it in and you didn't cut it, then it's puzzle. We thought it meant it's puzzle even after you cut it. He says, no, it's puzzle until you cut it. And Rav is correct. That's what Rav would say. Rav would claim that it's only puzzle until you cut it. Why? Because cutting it, according to Rav, is considered making it. Shmuel Amar Psulin Lailam. Shmuel says, no. Once it's put in and knotted and it's not cut, then it's going to remain puzzle. V'chein Amar Levi. Levi was a friend of Rav and Shmuel. It's puzzle Leilam. Psulim Leilam. V'chein Amar Rav Masna Amar Shmuel. Psulim Leilam. Rav Masna was a student of Shmuel. Even though Shmuel sometimes asks some questions, but he was considered a student of Shmuel. And he says in the name of Shmuel that it's always puzzle. Talking about the strings that are put in, that you didn't cut the loops. And you cut the loops afterwards. Ikadamri Amar Rav Masna B'Didi Aviyuvta. Some say a little different. Rav Masna said that I actually had this shaila. Vasilakami Demar Shmuel. I came in front of Shmuel. Varmali Psulim Lailam. Shmuel said it's always puzzle. Meisvei the Gemara is a question. Talan Vachkach Pasar Shichutim Shalem Psulim. That if you put it in and then afterwards you cut it, it's still puzzle. It's a very strong question. It says you even cut it, it's still puzzle. Also by sukkah it says that you should make the sukkah, but you don't make it from what's already made. In other words, you don't kosherize it afterwards. Mikana Amru, from here they said, that if you put ivy or a gourd or a grapevine over a sukkah and you put schach on top, it's puzzle. The Gemara says, 1 second. Hey, Chidami, what's the case that you're saying it's puzzle? If you never cut it, my area, why are you telling me it's puzzle? Because you have to make it kosher, but not kosherize it afterwards. Say that the problem is that it's attached. We had another problem. A sukkah that's attached, the schach is attached to the ground is puzzle. Not because because schach needs to be detached from the ground. You're giving me the wrong reason. Ella, it must be, the reason is b'shekatzitsan. The reason why it's puzzle because of tasim leimanasa is because you have to make it kosher and not kosherize it afterwards, is because this is a case where you actually cut it. Ukatani psula. And you see, it's puzzle even after you cut it. It's a kashan Rav. Rav says cutting it is making it. You see, it's a kashan Rav.
Why does it become we have it everywhere else?
Uh-huh.
We even can kosherize silverware,
Yeah.
we can do chuvan things.
Right.
Make it better. Over time,
Because over here, it says psula. It says psula. It doesn't say that don't cut it. It says psula. It's telling us to be the evan, that it's puzzle. It is puzzle, yeah. Amalach Rav would respond, Rav says that, you know what, cutting it would actually work. Over here, he didn't really cut it. He yanked it out. Now, what's exactly the issue with yanking it? If you cut it, then you do an activity where it separates. That's making the sukkah. But over here, where you just stretched it until it broke, so it doesn't look like it was really cut. It looks like it's still attached. It was stretched. It could be it's still attached, but you took it away. Different ways of learning this. But you didn't do an activity that you could say ketzitzasan zuhi asiyasan, that this is making the sukkah. It wasn't enough of an activity. So Rav would say, in this case, normally if you cut it, it's going to be kosher because you made it in a way of kosher. That's considered making it. But over here, you didn't do that action. So here it would still be possible. However, Mikal Makam Tolam Rachach Pasak Kasha Rav says kasha. Okay. But nevertheless, when it came to the tzitzis, we said that if you cut it, it's puzzle. Even though you cut it, that's a kasha on Rav. Said, yeah, you're right. That's not a kasha on Rav. No, you don't have to wear it. I understand, but is your tzitzis kosher? Is this considered? Is this acceptable? I don't know if that would make a difference. We're up to Leimek tonight. Okay, let's leave it right there.
Trying to change my seats so much.